Your hostess for today's show is Charlotte Canion.
I'm Charlotte Canion, award-winning author of the book You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying. And today we're here going to interview Sherry Maysonave, and she's written a book called Tatae's Promise. Sherry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, I know that our listeners love to know a little bit about the background of our authors. Can you tell us a little bit of your background?
I'm a native Texan, and I've had a varied career before I became a writer and author. I was a teacher, and I was in the public school system, and then my classroom became a corporate classroom where I was teaching professional dress and nonverbal communication. For many years, I was on the speaking circuit in the corporate world, and that's where my first book, Casual Power, How to Power Up Your Nonverbal Communication and Dress Down for Success, that's where that book was born. So I have 7 grandchildren and happily married to a wonderful man named Stephen Maysonave.
Very good. So how did you get into this story, Tate's Promise? How did that come about?
Well, it was a quite serendipitous thing. My husband, Stephen, is a businessman, and he went to a business meeting, and there he met a man named Dr. Moises Goldman. And they hit it off and began talking, and Moises found out that I was an author. And he had been sitting on his mother's 11 tapes that she recorded before she died in 1985 for like 35 years and wanting to write a book, but just not able to listen to the tapes. And so he began talking to me. We went to dinner with Moises and his wife, a lovely lady named Terry Goldman. And we just hit it off, and he began telling me his mother's absolutely atrocious story, and my heart just wrenched. And I really, Charlotte, I heard the voice of my soul, or I felt the pulse of my soul speak to me saying that I must write this book. And interestingly, I first suggested that he have a Jewish author, because the story, of course, is Jewish. And he thought about that and asked for a sample chapter, and I think interviewed some other authors and came back and said, I want you. And that's how it all began.
And so the journey began. Okay, so he had these, and what did you say, 11 tapes?
11 audio tapes that his mother recorded. She was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she felt she was too weak to write, so she recorded 11 audio tapes of her torture at the hands of the Nazis, what happened to her family, and her escape. She details her escape from Auschwitz. She got her sister out with her, and the many travails after that, and how she goes on to build a beautiful life afterwards. So the story is quite horrific, but in the end, it's very inspiring.
Now, was the tapes in several languages?
Yes. I think different from many people that survived the Holocaust in Europe. She was born Polish, and she then immigrated to Mexico City, which is kind of a rarity. And so she learned to speak Spanish, and her son Moises was born in Mexico City and speaks Spanish. So her tapes were primarily in Spanish and then Yiddish, some Yiddish mixed in. And Moises transcribed and translated these 11 tapes into Word files that I could work from to write, to bring the story to life on the page, the written page.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Okay, take us a little bit into the story. They were over there, and the Germans were taking over, and the Nazis. How old was she when all of this started?
Well, she was 18 years old when the German army invaded Poland, when the Nazis invaded Poland. And there was immediately an issues ordered for those Nazi-occupied areas of Poland for all synagogues to be burned to the ground. And she witnessed her community's synagogue burned, standing next to her father. And then a few months later, an axe came through the front door of their home, barely missed her head as she was walking through the entry. And they came in and confiscated the home and asked them or demanded that they pack suitcases within 15 minutes, one suitcase per person, and they put them in the back of an army truck and hauled them to the Malawi ghetto, where they lived in an old mill that had no furniture, Charlotte, and no kitchen. It was a horrible place. Now, many other Jews that had been incarcerated into the ghettos had apartments, had kitchens, had some furniture, but the government had transferred so many Polish Jews to the Malawi ghetto that it was full. And so they resorted to barns and old mills and what we would consider, uninhabitable places.
How many were in the family that lived in there?
Well, in their original home, there were 11 children. And interestingly, in 1933, when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, he began immediately taking action against Jews. And Hinda's father was very wise, and a year later saw what was happening and arranged for his 7 older children who had all graduated high school to get out of Poland and actually get out of all of Europe, because it was becoming a dangerous place, and get to North America to seek better lives and to be safe. And of course, he had planned for the rest of the family to join them, but circumstances became so that that was not possible. And at that point, then they were incarcerated in a ghetto.
Let me ask you this: is the whole book written around your one heroine?
Not entirely. Now, Hinda, there's no question, Hinda Monlak-Olman, or Hinda Monlak is before, at that point in time was her name. She is the primary character. And I want to tell you, Charlotte, she is so bold and courageous. It will inspire you and just blow your mind how brilliant and bold she is. Some people are bold, but they're not very smart. She is bold and brilliant and thinks on her feet, gets herself out of incredible situations. But there were many other characters that were very important to this story, and I felt they deserved to share the microphone with Hinda. And so there are 2 subplots, and one features a German doctor who worked at Auschwitz. His name was Dr. Walter Zielhofen, and he saved Hinda's life and fell in love with her when she came down with malaria. And he's a very pivotal character. And then there's another character, a young Jewish man, Wolf Jaskowitz, and he was from a different area of Poland, and he was in the Buchenwald concentration camp. And both of Walter and Wolf intersect with Hinda's life and affect it in very profound ways. And then there's also her sister Rachel, who is a primary character, so to speak, very important to the story.
Well, Sherry, we're going to continue this talk. Let's take a break for our commercial.
Introducing the Texas Authors Magazine. Discover our author spotlights, writing strategies, market insights, and news from our vibrant Texas literary scene. Starting with our July 2025 issue, as you see here, our exclusive Author Spotlight series brings Texas voices front and center. Grow your reach, connect with peers, and celebrate Texas storytelling. Get your free copy or join today at texasauthorsmuseum.com.
Hi, I'm Charlotte, and we're interviewing Sherry, who did Tate's Promise. And it is a horrific story of what happened to the Jews by the Nazis over there. Sherry, you were telling us a little bit about the characters, but you said there were some other main characters that played big parts. Can you elaborate on them a little bit?
Yes, well, first and foremost, Hinda is the primary character, and you will fall in love with her. She is so bold and courageous. And in addition to her, there's one of her sisters who's a very sensitive, shy soul, so different from Hinda. But their bond, to read about their bond, is truly inspiring. And then there were other characters that were so pivotal to Hinda's life and what happened that I felt they deserved to share the microphone with Hinda also. And one is a German doctor, Dr. Walter Zielhofen. He worked at Auschwitz against his will, but he worked there and he fell in love with Hinda. And he saved her life when she came down with malaria. And otherwise, she would have been sent to a gas chamber had he not helped her and given her curative medications. And then there's another man who I won't tell you how he turns out to be so pivotal in Hinda's life, but he was a young Jewish man from a different part of Poland, Wolf Jaskowitz, and a very powerful, incredibly strong person who survived Buchenwald concentration camp for 4 years. So that tells you the strength of his character. And his life intertwines with Hinda's at some point in the book, and you can read about that, and that's very exciting and rewarding. But all of the characters, I think, are characterized well in the book. You will just fall in love with them and root for them and cheer them on in these terrible circumstances.
Well, there's a little snippet I read about Hinda and her 3-year-old sister. Could you kind of, she kind of pulled her out of a line or something?
Yes. Well, when you enter Auschwitz, there's a thing called selection, and they separate families. And actually, Rachel was 6 years younger than Hinda, and they were put into different lines, as was her brother Joel, and then her youngest sister, Sarah. That may be who you're thinking of. She actually switched Rachel's lines. There was I'm not going to say what, it was a horrible thing happened with gunfire focused on infants. And everyone was in such an uproar. There was such chaos that Hinda took the opportunity to grab Rachel and pull her into her line. And then miraculously, they were able to be together throughout their time at Auschwitz. So there were miracles. There were absolute miracles that chased Hinda and Rachel in this story. And then sadly, the youngest sister, Sarah, who her story is phenomenal. She was so traumatized, she suffered mutism, selective mutism perhaps. And she was put in the line the farthest from the administration building. And you'll have to read about what happened to that line, the people who were placed there, and what happened to our precious little Sarah.
How old was Hinda when she passed?
When she was 65.
She
was 65 years old when she died. And that's a great question, Charlotte, because interestingly, the older brothers and older sister that got out of Poland before the Holocaust they all lived into their late 90s and over 100. And Hinda, who survived the Holocaust, died at 65. And her sister Rachel, who was 6 years younger than Hinda, died at 55. And they both died from cancer, and there's speculation of the chemicals they were exposed to and the immense stress of, I mean, they starved, malnourished for many years. So she was 65.
Was her son, he was born in Mexico. Is he still alive? Is he deceased?
He's still alive, and he transcribed and translated her tapes, and he's so very proud of the book. And with this book, Moises gets to fulfill a promise too. His mother died in his arms, and her last wish was that he make her story public so that people could know what happened, so that it would never happen again. So with this book, Moises has fulfilled a promise. And you know, the name of the book is Tatae's Promise, and Hinda's father, it's a word for Tatae, he promised her that somehow he knew that she would live and she would tell. So many promises have been fulfilled with this book, which has won 13 awards now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Now, I understand you've written some other books as well.
Yes, my first book was a nonfiction book, Casual Power, as I mentioned earlier. Casual Power: How to Power Up Your Nonverbal Communication and Dress Down for Success, was written for the business casual business market, and it was wildly successful back in the early 2000s, and globally successful. And after I retired from the corporate circuit, I wrote a children's book, Egg Mania, Where's the Egg and Exactly? And it's won 5 awards, and then went on to write, because I just had this clarion call to be creative, a debut novel, The Girl Who Could Read Hearts, and it has won 15 awards to date. And now Tatae's Promise.
So how many years have you been writing?
I'll have to calculate that. I would say since 1997. I was very fortunate when I was working in the corporate world, and there was so much confusion around business casual when it became popular, that CEOs and companies were begging me for written information on appropriate business casual attire. So that's where my first book was born, and that's when I first started writing, except for that story I wrote in the 3rd grade about a magical bunny.
Now, did you publish that one?
No, but it was posted in the hallway. My teacher liked it so much that it was posted in this glass case in the hallway.
So you were a budding author back then. Well, what do you look for in the future? What would you?
Well, I'm looking for inspiration. I'm very fortunate I write best when I'm truly inspired, as I was by Tatae's Promise, and I was by all of the books I've written. And I do have some more children's books in the hopper and ready to go. So we'll just see. I'm going to see what inspiration strikes.
Whatever hits you. Do you like writing true stories more than the fiction?
I do. I learned with this book and Tatae's Promise that I really love historical fiction. I loved the research, and I wanted to put a historical focus on this book, to put the story in, historical context. And I enjoyed that very much. But I do like the creative aspect of just pure fiction. But something based on a true story now, I think, is my absolute favorite.
Is your definite favorite. Well, Sherry, this is just fabulous. We're going to take another break and let our sponsors do their thing.
Who will win the 2026 Best of Texas Books Awards? Texas Authors Museum 15th Annual Book Contest, now open. Celebrating books published between December 15, 2024 and December 1, 2025, in every genre. Submit your cover and PDF via email to texasauthors@outlook.com. We will invoice you for the $50 entry fee. Learn more at texasauthors.museum.com.
America has 250 years of stories, but the next chapter? That's yours to write.
Introducing Voices of America. Your voice, your story. What does America mean to you?
Submit your story. Shape the next 250 years. Enter now at AmericanShortStories.org.
Hi, I'm Charlotte, and I have the privilege of interviewing Sherry, and she's written Tate's Promise. Sherry, it has been fabulous listening to you tell your journey and how, I guess you'd call it a God thing, how, you met this gentleman who shared your story. Can you, if you were inspiring other authors to write, what would you tell them how to get started?
I would say listen to your inner voice. If you are infatuated with authors and books and you would love to be an author yourself, just start writing and listen to your inner voice, and don't be hard on yourself. Just start writing and let it flow, and then you can edit. And always remember to show, not tell. It's better if the reader can experience it versus being told the story. But just listen to that creative urge you have and just do it. Just sit down and write.
Is there anybody you've inspired that you know of to write?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I have friends around me now that have published books. And back in when I worked in the corporate world, I also trained people to do what I do with Empowerment Enterprises. And two of those women now one has 4 books out, and another one is just releasing her second book. I've inspired a nephew that now has his second and third book coming out. So I'm sure there are others, but those I know of for sure.
For sure. Well, you are inspiring because you've taken someone else's story and made it live, made it live,
Yes.
made it powerful. I actually probably feel like somebody else is going to come along and give you their story and let you write. It's hard to do. And I think you told us earlier that it was interpreted out of Spanish and Yiddish.
Yes, that's correct.
And you said that they spoke Spanish mostly. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Moises translated and transcribed the tapes and put them into Word files for me to work from to bring the story to life on the written page. And Charlotte, it took me 4 years, even though I wasn't having to make up the story, but to piece it together and all the research and to really make it come alive on the written page. And readers tell me that they are experiencing it. As they read it, they feel like they're living it along with Hinda and the other characters. And that was one of my goals.
And you probably did research on the Nazi, beyond what he interpreted. You probably went back and found some of the facts that happened through that whole horror story.
I did. And I didn't want it to be the typical Holocaust story. So I searched for some unusual facts also. And everything in the book is factual. It may not have happened to the Monlak family or the Yoskovich family, but it happened to someone. I did extensive research. I did want a historical focus to the story.
Well, tell us again where they can find your books, where they can see you if you're speaking anywhere.
Well, you can always go to my website, sherrymaysonave.com or tataespromise.com and check on the speaking. The book is widely available, can be ordered if it's not in stock from any bookstore. And of course, it's available on Amazon. All 4 versions available on Amazon and on barnesandnoble.com. And we have an audiobook coming out soon. So for those who prefer to listen rather than read, and we have an incredible narrator. So that's also very exciting, but it's widely available.
Sherry, this has been a pleasure. You're a beautiful person, and thank you for telling the story. I'm Charlotte Canion, and I want you to remember, a rose is like a book. You can't know its beauty until you look at it. But a book is like a rose. You won't know its full beauty until you open it. Bye for now.
Welcome to the Texas Authors TV show, produced by Biana Bourgeois for the Texas Authors Museum and Institute of History, copyright 2025. If you would like to be a sponsor of our show, please reach out to us via email at texasauthors@outlook.com. If you would like to be an author on our show, please email us at texasauthors@outlook.com for more information. Music is Frolic of Words. It was created for Texas Authors Institute by Happy Follows.